presentation. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming this morning for this presentation of the AEBC Self-Advocacy Guide. Just going to give you a little bit of history. This guide, or its predecessor, which was called Stand Up, Speak Out, was first developed in 2006, and it was a 95-page document. All of the resources were right in the guide. And of course, things were not, I mean, that's nearly 20 years ago now, so things were not all that up to date, and the resources were not up to date. So it was decided that we needed to, if we were going to, utilize this at all, we needed to update it. And I did that over the last couple of months. And so I agreed to present today because I'm the one who's most familiar with the current version of the guide, which is just being called AEBC Self-Advocacy Guide. And it's now 15 pages long, which is much more manageable. And it includes a couple of appendices, which I will be referencing during my presentation this morning. So the actual guide itself is probably only about 12 pages long. So I do suggest that everybody go and have a look at it. If you haven't had a look, it's on the advocacy page on the AEBC website, which you'll find at blindcanadians.ca. And on the homepage, you'll find a link to our advocacy page. And I'll be referencing that again at the end of the presentation. Okay. So the guide starts off with just a basic introduction to what advocacy is and what are the benefits of advocacy and why might you want to do advocacy. And so it talks about advocacy being the art of persuasion. And I think that is really what it is. And it is a bit of an art, but it is also a bit of a science, I think, as well. And that there are certain formulas or checklists or steps that if you take these steps, then you will be much more likely to have more successful advocacy. And I'll be going through a lot of this today in terms of the steps and the sort of science side of it. So when is advocacy needed? Well, it might be needed to protect your rights, or it might be needed to receive the supports that you are entitled to. So those are the sort of situations, and I think most of us have experienced, one or both of those circumstances when we felt that something wasn't right and that we needed something to change. And in those cases, advocacy might be needed. I'll give you just a few examples of where advocacy might be needed, and these will probably be pretty familiar to everybody. But first of all, it might be in a situation where the treatment that you receive by, say, a store clerk is either disrespectful, and we've all probably experienced, or most of us have experienced, when store clerks or servers or whatever don't speak to you as the blind person. They might speak to the sighted person who's with you. That's a bit of a disrespectful way of interacting with us. So that might be a situation. Or also, if the information they give you is of very unhelpful, like, again, we've probably all experienced this. Please go take a seat in the chair, and they're pointing across the room, and you over there, and you have no idea where they're talking about. So advocacy might be something as simple as, dealing with that kind of situation where you don't need to, do anything very formal. It might be just a case of education. Another example is with post-secondary students and getting the access to the learning materials and texts and articles and things in an accessible format. And this still is an issue, I understand, for some students, and getting those resources in a timely manner, and can be very challenging for visually impaired post-secondary students. And the one we've probably all heard about is the guide dog user who has been refused a taxi ride by a taxi driver. They don't like dogs, or they say they have an allergy, or whatever, or they just don't even stop and they just drive by with a guide dog. So those are some of the circumstances that are pretty common, and that the latter two may require much more of a formal advocacy process. So AEBC can offer support to anybody who's doing self-advocacy through a few different methods. So first of all, we do have resources such as this guide, and there are other resources that you can access from our advocacy page. And if you're just wanting to read about advocacy, we provide opportunities for persons to learn advocacy skills by joining others who are doing advocacy, who are seasoned advocates and are involved in, say, our advocacy committee and working on joint issues. Those are usually not self-advocacy issues. Those are usually more like what I call a corporate advocacy. But the skills that you need and the approaches are often very similar. So you can learn some skills by joining a group and being a part of a team. And we can also connect you one-on-one with a seasoned advocate if you're needing a more sort of personal approach to advocacy. This is not a formal program that we have. But there are certain folks on our committee that are in our organization who are quite willing to help folks if they're struggling with an advocacy issue. So before you begin, this is still sort of in the introductory part of the guide. There's a few things that they talk about here. And this is something that, yes, it is there. I just rearranged the order here. Determining the jurisdiction under which the concern falls. So as we know, in this country, we have things that fall under federal jurisdiction, and those are things like banks and telecommunications and airlines are a few examples of the federal jurisdictions. Provincial jurisdictions are more like your sort of local transportation, education, things that might fall under your provincial building code. Those would be things under provincial. Then we've got municipal. And of course, municipalities have bylaws that govern the kind of things the way things are supposed to happen within your municipality. And then it might just be kind of like more of a personal or individual issue and doesn't fall under any of those other categories. More like, as I say, the clerk that treats you disrespectfully. There's no laws against that, but there is, so you need to know which jurisdiction your issue falls under. And you can usually, I was actually testing Google, my Google Home the other day to see how good she was at determining this. And she got most of them, and she actually was pretty accurate. She maybe didn't give me enough information in some, but if you go on, use a Google search, or if you really can't figure it out, then, connecting with AEBC and we can help you out with that. Okay. And the second thing that you need to do before you begin, and these are things that you can probably be finding out not when you've necessarily got an advocacy issue, but sort of gaining the skills in between times or gaining the knowledge in between times, is to know what your rights are. And pardon me, I'm just going to have to take a drink of water. We have several pieces of legislation in this country, and we're getting more and more as the provinces come on board. So familiarizing yourself with the different, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Human Rights Act. And I think the Canadian Human Rights Act is sort of builds on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it includes the mandate to accommodate people with disabilities. And so that's sort of where we would come in and looking at this legislation. And of course, we've got the Accessible Canada Act, and they are still in the process of creating the regulations around that. So there isn't, I'm not sure how many of the regulations have actually been approved and accepted. I haven't really been following the federal level as closely, but there's certainly, I know, are more to come. And once those regulations are in place, then you've got you've got the those to use in your advocacy work. And then provincial legislation, each of the provinces is dealing with disability and accessibility in different ways. Several of the provinces now do have an Accessibility Act. I think it's 4 or 5 of them now. Others do not, but the guide has in it has a link to all the different provinces. And if you go to that link to your province, it'll tell you the latest in what your province is doing in regards to accessibility and legislation. And and then that includes the territories as well. And it also, the guide includes a link to the Canadian Rights Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. Okay, so now we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of advocacy. Successful advocacy has sort of, according to our guide anyways, has 4 steps to it. So step 1, and it's really important to not jump right into action. Action is step 3 in this list. We're tempted to do that, but it's really good to do a little bit of legwork ahead of time, and then I think you'll find your advocacy will be more effective. So the step 1 is preparation. So under this, you would assess the situation, define the issue, gather information, the where, what, when, why, and how kind of thing. Identify your supports. So finding others that might have had the same issue, finding other organizations. AEBC, of course, would be one, but other organizations may be able to provide support as well. Family and friends who are, supportive. And, so thinking about all of that. When you've got all that sort of background, fairly firmed up in your head, then you go into what we call the planning stage. And this includes determining your goal. So, and I like to use the acronym or SMART goals, and that the SMART stands for specific. So come up with something very specific, not something too broad or something too big, but very concrete. What is your goal? Measurable. Make sure it's something that you'll know if it's been achieved. What's the SMA? Achievable. So pick something that is achievable. Don't shoot for the moon. That might not be achievable, but break it down into something that you can achieve. Realistic. Again, it's a bit like it being achievable. Make sure it's also realistic. Is it realistic? I mean, if you're asking for something that's going to cost millions and millions of dollars to happen, it's probably not realistic or not in the time frame you're looking at. And that's the T in SMART is timely. So you want this to be something that is, sort of has a time frame, and you're going to be able to know when you've achieved the goal in a certain period of time. And then after you've got your goal, then you identify your preferred solution. What is it you actually want? And that might be different for you than it is for, the next blind person. We don't all have the same needs, and we don't all have the same expectations. So, if your solution is going to work for you, that's fine. It may not work for every other blind person, but that's okay. Determine what's going to work for you. And then identify the resources that are available to you. And this would include, how much time do you have to put into this? How much energy do you have to put into it? If there's any financial resources that are needed, investigate those. If there are people and supports that you need to facilitate your advocacy work, then identify who they are and get them on board. So those are your resources. And then you choose a course of action. So once you've got all that done, how am I actually going to address this issue? And I'll be getting into a little bit about the different courses of action that the guide includes in a minute. And along with developing a course of action, and I've also got down here develop a strategy. I think those two go together. So what's the strategy? What techniques are you going to use, etc. What is your course of action going to be? And then at the end of step 2, the guide actually has a checklist, and which basically determines, are you ready to proceed to action? And even if you don't go through step 1 and step 2, step by step from the guide, I would strongly recommend that you at least start at this checklist and make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. And I'm not going to go through that now. It's quite a few items in it. It wasn't developed by us. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of where we took this from, but we cite that source in the guide. Step 3 then is action. So this is putting your strategies into action. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more in a minute. But the big thing under here that I noted for today is to make sure that you keep records of what you do, especially if you're doing email advocacy or letter writing advocacy, then you do have a bit of a paper trail already, or records. Make sure you save those somewhere safe. And you might want to make just a short note or add a note somewhere that, like saying, I wrote to so-and-so on this date, and I I gave them 3 days to respond, or a week to respond, or whatever. Just some quick notes, summary of what you've written, if you didn't include all of that in the email itself. And the other thing in this section that's important, and again, it's another kind of paperwork piece and having a paper trail, is if you're asking for something and you're being denied at some point through the process, ask to get it in writing if you can. And so that you again have that to refer to if you need to take the issue further. You can actually show that you were denied in writing. And then the last thing here is to follow up. So make sure that you, whatever action or strategy you take, that you follow up based on your plan. So you follow up either with a reminder of the situation, or you follow up with a thank you, or you follow up with something, but you follow up. And step 4, this is after you've done your action, and it's come to some sort of conclusion. It may not have concluded fully, but it's important to evaluate what your advocacy efforts. So you want to examine your strategies chosen, and was that a good choice? And, did that work for you? Or, did you feel that was, an effective way of communicating? Have your goals been met? Obviously. And if they're measurable goals, you'll be able to tell. And we may not always achieve the goal that we had, or not fully achieve the goal that we had. That often is the case with advocacy. But you can, if you assess it and think about the things I'm just going to say in a moment, to say, okay, I didn't necessarily get what I was actually looking for, but did anything else happen that has moved this, moved the dial, moved this issue forward? And the kind of things you might be assessing there or evaluating there is, has education occurred? So is somebody now more aware of your situation or what they need to do in the future? Even if it's just 1 or 2 people, that is a positive outcome from your process, even if you didn't get your full goal. Yeah, has awareness increased? Did it draw attention, public attention to the issue? So therefore, you may not be aware of people out there who know more about it, but it went to the public in some way, and therefore their public awareness would have increased. The other thing you want to evaluate is, who are your new supporters? So you may have picked up some new supporters along the way. We call them allies nowadays. Who are they? And, and who might actually be able to support you if you wish to, revisit the issue or change your strategy. Have any new resources developed? And that sort of goes along with the last one. Have you got extra new people that are, on board now, that could be part of your support network, could be a resource? Did some sort of guidelines come out of the process that would be helpful or useful? Did an organization or an entity change its policies? Those kind of things would be, all positive things that come out of your advocacy efforts. And then you want to ask yourself, should you continue with your advocacy if you haven't got what you were looking for? And you maybe need to go back and, do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Maybe there's somewhere else I can take this and someone else can do it. Maybe I need to take on it. Do you need to adjust your tactics or focus or your goals? And do you need to adopt new strategies and techniques? So those are all questions you ask. And then the last thing I've got here, it talks about is celebrate. Celebrate the successes, even if it's just, wow, it feels good, and it puts a smile on your face, and you say, yeah, I made some progress there. It can be simple as that, or it could be share it with a peer, and or you can go for a beer or whatever. But celebrate. It's important to acknowledge, the steps we make moving forward. Now, I'm just quickly going to go over some advocacy techniques and strategies that are also in the guide, and these are looked at in much more detail. And the first thing I want to mention is the guide has a link to a supplement. So this used to be in the guide itself. It's now a link that takes you to a resource or a supplement, and it's on effective communication. And this is a really, I think, valuable resource to utilize in a lot of other areas, not just in advocacy. So it's a good resource to have under your, at your fingertips. And I think the one piece I always feel that's really important is we all have probably experienced situations that have made us pretty annoyed, pretty ticked off. We may be quite frustrated. We might even be, hot, very mad and angry. And this communication guide, addresses that and says, that's not the time to start advocating for your needs. You need to step back, cool down, because folks do not respond well when when people are, addressing them in an aggressive way. So, but it addresses all of that and some of the other requirements of what it is to communicate well. Now, sorry, I'm just going to take another sip of water. So the guide then goes on to talk about the strategy of advocating with someone in person. And this would be when you set up a formal meeting with somebody, then you're going to meet with them in person. And we're back to doing that in some situations now. So that is still included in the guide. And the next section is if you're going to have a meeting over the phone. And in both those strategies, the guide talks about what you should do before the meeting, what you should do and think about during the meeting, and what you should do after the meeting. And again, it's step by step, the sort of checklists of, of what you need to do before, during, and after the meeting. And it brings up some issues and considerations that I thought were interesting, and that it talks about being in the right environment to establish a sort of you don't want to be in a situation where the person you're speaking to has sort of a power control over. You want to be in a sort of much more of a kind of neutral situation, and that you may deal with that by taking somebody with you. So it isn't, you just one-on-one, or perhaps you with two other people talking. So anyways, it addresses those kind of considerations. So I think that's a good piece. And then there's at the bottom of the guide, the first appendices is a sample of a record of a telephone conversation. So it's like a template that you can fill in if you have a telephone, if your advocacy is over the phone, and it helps you just note everything that you need to note from that conversation. And then the other strategy it talks about, or the third strategy it talks about, is if you're going to do your advocacy in writing. And this would be either an email, or it could be a hard copy letter that you send by snail mail, but much more likely it's liable to be potentially a letter that might be attached to an email. So, the email kind of introduces the thing. It might just, but the letter itself is much more formal in nature. And again, there's an appendices at the end of the guide. This is the second appendices that gives you an outline of how to write a fairly formal letter. It's not for emails, although you could use it for an email, but it's definitely if you're going to write a formal letter. And we don't do a lot of that these days, a lot of us. So it's good to have the reminders of, what do you need to put in that letter? And then it talks about, the structure of the actual, paragraphs in the letter and what they should include. And make sure you keep copies again of what you send and receive. I mentioned that earlier. And then the last section in the guide is using the media. And a lot of us may not get to this point, but some of us may wish to send a letter to the editor or send out a press release. That's usually an organizational thing rather than an individual. Individuals would be more like letters to the editor. Or you may wish to have an interview, request an interview, or you may be asked by the media to do an interview. And so there is, again, a supplement, a link to a supplement that outlines what you do with, if you want to deal with the media. So this was taken out of the guide. It's not there because it's not something that everybody's going to need to have right at their fingertips, but there is a whole supplement on that. And then a couple more things the guide includes after that is a link to some case studies. And these are not necessarily very recent incidents, but they're all still relevant of AEBC members who have written up, I guess, their advocacy experiences. And so it gives you an opportunity to look at, what, how those advocacy efforts went. And I think probably, hopefully, we will be adding to this case histories as, moving forward. And then the very last thing is there's, in the guide, there's a link to the AEBC advocacy page. And on the AEBC advocacy page, there's a guide to the link. And on the AEBC advocacy page itself at blindcanadians.ca, there it talks about our advocacy committee and what they do and how you can get involved in that work. It has a link to our advocacy position statements, which have sort of evolved over the years and things that we've taken a position on. There's a link to those. There's a link to past sort of formal submissions that AEBC has usually sent to the government or a government entity of some sort. A link to current advocacy projects and initiatives. So this is kept fairly up to date. What we're working on at the moment or have been working on over the last few months. And then there's, sort of a section on how to get involved with advocacy with AEBC a bit more. And recent blog posts that a lot of our blog posts are advocacy related. So there's actual posts are there. I don't know if it's the full text. It might be a link, a sort of teaser, and then a link to the full blog post. So that's the guide. And what I was hoping to do today, I'm just going to check the time. There is. Oh, good. Okay, it's about the same time as it took me yesterday to go through this. So I'll entertain any questions in a moment. But the other thing that I'm also wanting folks to think about, and you can speak to, is where do we want to go from here with this guide? Do people just want to look at the guide and kind of just try and put it into practice themselves? Or would it be helpful for us to have some more in-depth workshops on, say, some of these more strategies that are listed? And we did do workshops like that in 2021. It was a series of 4 workshops. And I believe they were 2-hour sessions on a Saturday morning. And so we looked at these in much more detail. And then folks were given some exercises to do between sessions where you actually got a chance to put into practice writing an advocacy letter, or that's the one that I can remember. There are other exercises that were involved. So we could do something like that again. Um, and then the other thing I was thinking that people might want to think about is, and we have talked about this not recently, but it is a possibility, is some sort of a more formal mentorship, advocacy mentorship program, perhaps on a one-on-one basis, where people are, the mentors get a bit of training, and our members can be connected with a peer mentor who can assist them through the process. As I say, right now it's not formalized. We just do it on a very casual basis. So, Richard, we open it up to questions. And you can raise your hand or just unmute and speak up.
Yeah, so let me go over the commands really quickly for those that need a refresher. To mute and unmute yourself, it's Alt A on the PC, or *6 if you're phoning in. I don't think anyone's phoning in. So on the PC, it's Alt A. If you're using the Zoom app on your Android or iPhone, the mute and unmute button should be, unless they've moved it, at the left hand left hand corner of your screen. And then to raise your hand, it's in the more menu in the app, and on the PC it's Alt Y. On the Mac it's Option Y, and on the Mac for muting and unmuting it's Shift Command A. So yeah.
Richard.
So yeah.
Chantal, next to the participants list is a hand where it says raise hand today.
Oh, is that new? That's new.
Yeah, on my phone. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay.
Keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, they always. I didn't see it in the last update myself, so that's okay. So for that's new. If you've got the newest version of the Zoom app, as Chantal does, you might see the raise hand button right on your main screen next to the participants list. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so
It's
yeah, just
Susan.
unmute yourself. You're the only one that's had a
Yeah, go
question
ahead,
so far.
Susan. Yeah, go ahead.
I have an idea.
Yes.
I was thinking for people to feel safe, we could have some sessions of role playing.
Yes, we did include role playing in the workshops that were done in 2021. And the groups were about, I don't know, about 10 people at the different sessions, and the workshop facilitator at the time would ask for volunteers and never pushed anybody to do the role playing, but there was somebody that always volunteered. So yes, it's helpful. It is helpful.
Yes, because I wasn't as adept at using my phone at the time when those sessions were held. But I feel that, if we had somebody, say, in a restaurant saying, well, what would she like? And, somebody would be able to say, reply to it without getting snarky.
Yeah, what kind of responses, what kind of responses would get the best results? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, and that's just a very usual example of what happens. But yeah, because then you could, because sometimes when we fool around, we can get snarky about what we'd like to say to people that mistreat us when we're in group. And if we tone things to be respectful, that would be really, really a good thing.
So that would almost be like almost the communicate, we could do that as a, effective communication, right? Because that's what I was talking about in there. So it could, yeah. So that could be, we could do that as a separate thing. And then if, or as part of a bigger workshop series.
Yeah, because we all talk about the over there people.
Yeah.
And I figured out that when their voice, when you can tell when their head leans away from where you are, that they mean on the right, and if it leans to the left. But
Yeah.
that's the best you can do with that concept when you can't see.
Yeah, sometimes you can sense the body language and then you can point and say, do you mean over there? Is that where you mean? But
Yeah, that kind of deal.
yeah. So we certainly could do that, Sue. So I think we can that's one takeaway. That's great.
Okay,
Simran,
I
are
will
you
mute.
taking notes?
Pardon?
I was just sorry, I was asking Simran, are you taking notes?
Yes, I am.
Okay, if you can take down these suggestions, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And I would need the recording as well, because just to compare all of the notes that I'm taking.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's great. And also, Simran, we in the training room we turned on the meeting summaries function as well too. So you probably will be able to have access to that as well as the recording.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, any
Okay.
other questions? And so far there's no hands up. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Or if you just want to speak to
an issue or something.
Yeah, speak to what we might do for next steps moving forward. What do we want to do with this guide? What do we want to do with, self-advocacy training? So we've got one suggestion, which I think is a good one.
And for those that haven't done the survey yet, it's also a good opportunity to sort of talk about that too, because I noticed that was some of the questions about, next steps about, interest in peer mentoring and advocacy issues as well
Yes,
too.
it
So
was there. You're right,
yeah.
Richard. Yeah. The AEBC survey. Oh, Monique has raised her hand.
Monique, you raised your hand, so just go ahead
Yeah.
and unmute yourself. It's Alt A on your computer. Because all I can do is ask you to unmute.
I wonder if she also has to say the okay for the recording.
I bet you. So
Yeah.
Monique, if you can hear me, you need to cycle through to the permissions dialog to say okay to the recording, then you'll be able to unmute yourself. So if you just push F6, tab, try
Just
tab,
tab. It'll take you to the okay button. Yeah.
and then hit enter on that. It should dismiss it. But if it doesn't have focus, you will have to use F6 to cycle through to that dialog.
We're not hearing you, Monique. Sorry. Keep trying. And does anybody else have any questions in the meantime? And Monique, if you get in there, you can just jump in.
Okay, Monique, you're actually having trouble with your mic and it's showing you as unmuted right now. So I'm not sure what your issue might be, but it's showing you that you're unmuted because the option I have for your name is to mute you again.
No, we're not. If you're speaking, we're not hearing you. Sorry. Oh, she's lowered her hand.
That was me that did
Oh,
that.
that you
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else while we're waiting for Monique? Vangelis? Brian? Alice? Lisa? Pat?
Frederick?
Yeah, Frederick.
It's Pat.
Yes, Pat, go ahead.
I am, I know that, you know, all the people with AEBC know that we're having an event in Thunder Bay in May. And there are people in Thunder Bay who have expressed a real interest and desire to learn about advocacy because they haven't been very active in Thunder Bay yet. We're still, if you will, opening up after the pandemic. And so I'm wondering if, as this group would be not people who are blind and partially sighted, if you would be able to do some sessions for a partner organization or another group, that kind of thing.
We could certainly, yeah, we could certainly discuss that at the board. At
Sure.
this point, we just, we're sort of set up to do it for our members.
Right.
But there's nothing to stop us doing it for if after I will be doing this presentation at that workshop at that event, and after this presentation, if the groups feel that this is the route they want to go, then we could bring it back to the board and have a look at what what kind of an arrangement we can make with other organizations.
That's great.
Or the folks can join AEBC. we accept sighted members, so they can join AEBC, and then they'd be eligible to join in our workshops if we have some.
Thank you.
Any other
Okay.
questions? Monique, I'm just going to ask again, I don't think you've addressed your audio issues, but did you? The only other suggestion I have, Monique, is you could leave the meeting and come back.
Or could she type a question in the chat?
Possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
So chat
Okay,
is.
she's left.
There she
She's
is.
left the meeting. So
Yeah.
She'll
So
try to
she's
come
going to
back.
try that and come back, and then she can maybe type it in the chat.
Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Chantel?
No, but I was just going to let you know I need to slip out now, as I mentioned to Linda before.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
You go ahead, Chantel.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, we'll just wait for Monique to come back and see if she can get in, and then I think we'll wrap it up because doesn't seem to be any other questions at this point.
There's
Oh,
Monique.
there we are. There she is.
Now you'll have to unmute yourself, Monique. So try Alt A again. And assuming you've accepted the permissions dialog for the recording. Okay,
Monique?
it's
Oh, go ahead, Richard.
no, it's doing the same thing. So I
Okay,
think
do you
you
want
might be having.
I was going to say,
Ye-
Monique, can you type it in the chat? Are you able to do that and send it to us? Because then we'll hear the question.
The chat is disabled.
Oh,
Oh.
well, then that ain't going to
Oh,
work.
that doesn't work. Sorry.
No.
Okay.
No.
Alrighty. So Monique, how about you just send it to Marcy or send it to one of us, put it on the list somewhere and we'll get it and we'll address it. And if it's something we need to share with others, we will. Anyways, I think that's probably it since there don't seem to be any other questions. So thank you very much for everyone's attendance today. And yeah, and Monique's left us. Yeah. So I'll say good day and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.